Ladies and gents, welcome back to the Pole Position YouTube channel and welcome to our Albert Park Australian GP review. A crazy race, just straight bonkers. In the end, George Russell, unsurprisingly, running out winner in that race, 3 seconds to his teammate Kimi Antonelli, and then a further 13 back on the road was Charles Leclerc. I've got a lot of thoughts. I think it's hard to sort of make all sense in this video here, but I got a lot of thoughts in the new cars and the way they race, the way they qualify as well. I think you got to separate the two things, because the racing or the overtake modes and the boost modes, I get it. It's inducing excitement. It gives you that sort of back and forth slingshot effect. Is it a little bit too much? Yes. But I think the biggest thing is in qualifying, we're seeing cars lift off and brake, well and truly before the corner. We saw that 50-kilometre-an-hour change as Max Verstappen's going through 8 and 9. That for me is what really, really just rubbed me the wrong way. And I really like the new aero, like the simplified aero. It makes it for cars to be, allowed to follow closer and stay nearby, and that's when that overtake and boost mode can be used. But what if you just gave the cars one massive, battery allowance for the full race? You go back to, I'd love to go back to the V10s or something like that, but predominantly, take away this battery and allow cars just to race each other rather than out strategy each other and just see how it goes. Because I really think the new car designs and the aero design, it induces, following. It induces, cars to stay nearby and be in that sort of punching range. And I think I actually like the overtake mode as opposed to DRS, and I like the active aero and the fact that I think it makes for better chances of closing gaps and then overtaking. But I just think with this whole battery, you're going to get one way or the other. You're going to keep getting that constant slingshot back and forth. And I just don't think that's I think that's F1. I think that's Formula E. Like you got Formula E there if you want to go watch electrically powered cars go racing. This is Formula One. This is supposed to be the best in the world. It's supposed to be the quickest cars in the world. I don't want to see cars lifting off or breaking into major corners. And we've got the big back straight at Shanghai next week with the hairpin. What's going to happen halfway down the straight? Everyone's going to stop? Is everyone going to lift off or start dropping 50, 60 kilometers an hour on the back straight? That'd just be ridiculous. But as it currently stands, it probably looks like that's going to happen. But I've gone on a tangent already. Let's start with the race. Piastri and Hulkenberg don't start. The Australian curse continues. That's, I guess, the major talking point from before the race. Oscar Piastri, I think it was through turn 4, he gets on a curbing, apparently 1,000 kilowatts of energy that he hasn't had on that upshift or the downshift. I think it was an upshift, and he's got all this energy, cold tires, got on the curbing, and he binned it into the wall. And I thought, I was working at the time, someone said, have you seen the news about Piastri? And I'm thinking, what's happened here? The race hasn't started yet. What's happened here? And I check it. The Australian curse well and truly lives. I do not think we'll ever see an Australian driver get on the podium in Australia. It seems to be a disaster right now for Australian drivers at Albert Park. Really tough start for him. I think if there's any benefit or, I guess, upside of this, that McLaren looked awful yesterday, and fair play. I'll do some driver ratings later in the week, but Lando Norris, fair play to finish in 5th, 2 and a bit seconds up the road for Max Verstappen, but he's 40 seconds off Lewis Hamilton, and they're well and truly almost, half a minute off the pace of the big boys. And they went from being top of the pile, end of season 24 all the way through 25, to be so far off, like this far off. I think it's a lot of work for McLaren to do. One, to understand the engine. They've got that Mercedes engine. They're going to have to use that to their advantage, but also to find pace in this car. It does not look quick in the corners nor in the straights. They're struggling a lot in FP3 and in qualifying through Sector 2. I just think the top end speed is not there in that McLaren Mercedes car. They've got a lot of work to do if they're going to be successful this season, or at least in the fight. Oscar Piastri, tough, awful yet again. I thought he looked the best out of both the McLarens, but he didn't get a chance to start the race. And then Nico Hulkenberg having some sort of telemetry problems. They couldn't. The communication between the car and the pit wall wasn't happening, so he didn't get the start. Shame for him because of what happened with Gabriel Bortoleto and how well he did. It would have been good to see if both Audis could have gotten the points yesterday, but that was before the race. Let's come to some of the big stories during the race, and starting with, I guess, Ferrari. The talk of pre-season testing with all my mates, the punditry. How quick would Ferrari be off the line? They were rocket ships off the line. Charles Leclerc from P4 all the way up into P1. They just bolt. It's like their tyres are in the optimal range and everyone else is on ice cold wets. It feels like they get... and it's not wheel spin, I know that, but it feels like everyone's getting wheel spin and the Ferrari just kicks into gear. I don't know what they've got going on there, but it works, and it's going to work for the next 4 to 5 races, you'd think. Especially we're going straight to China. We'll then go straight into Japan from that. I think a 1 week break between there. So you've got 3 races in 4 weeks. That's not enough time for teams to work out how to counter this. Everyone got off the line, but no one was able to get through that sort of second phase, and that's where Ferrari kicked into gear. Hamilton, Leclerc just bolt. Hamilton then got sort of caught up in that big pack there with Norris and Hadjar and Lindblad getting in there as well. But Leclerc off the line, fantastic. 1-3 for Ferrari in the early moments of the race. At a great ding-dong battle between Leclerc and George Russell across sort of the first 10 or so laps. Russell nearly going off that big lock-up into one on lap 9. That was a nervy moment for him, but it was promising in the early phases how Ferrari were able to hold Russell at bay. I think Leclerc, though, mentioned he was dumping a lot of his battery to defend George Russell, and it was obviously going back and forth. And I think due to that electrical output is why Ferrari was staying in it. But it shows, though, I was doing it in my prediction video, I thought Ferrari would have good race pace. They did have respectable race pace, and the great start they made, they had the track position. You obviously have that first VSC there with Isaac Hadjar breaking down. We'll get into him in a bit, but Mercedes pit, everyone pits. So Norris pits. I don't think Verstappen pit at the time because he was on the hards, but the major hitters all pit. The 2 Mercedes, they double stacked. Norris jumped in there as well. Ollie Behrman went in the pits. The big names who did well went in. They ducked into the pits. Ferrari came into this race wanting a one-stop. And look, it would have worked if it was a normal race. If it was, the 2025 cars that, don't normally break down, that I understand that because you're lacking what they thought was about 4 tenths a lap on this Mercedes car. Let's go long. Let's force their hand. But when you get the first VSC, I get you're on a one-stop. Okay. Can you think on the fly? Can you split the strategies? Lewis Hamilton said it. Hamilton should be their their strategist, their chief engineer, because he goes and says, let's split the strategies. And they should do that because they've got the 1-3. They've got the track position. They're holding Russell at bay. Hamilton was getting closer and closer with Leclerc and Russell scrapping. Dive in. Split. Hamilton called for it. He should have got the strategy split. Get him in the pits. Let him match what the Mercedes were doing. He was already up the chuff of George Russell anyway. Let Leclerc go long. He was happy to go long. Let him go long. Let Hamilton match the strategy. And you know what probably would have happened? You probably would have got Lewis fighting for P2, I think, in the end, because I think track position is going to be so important in this sort of battle in the early stages, where Mercedes have the 1 lap pace and Ferrari have strong race pace with this new battery and the boost mode and the overtake mode. If Ferrari can remain within a second or ahead of the Mercedes, you'll see them just keep changing positions. And you'll see the side sort of just stay in amongst the pack. And then you never know with these new engines. I know Mercedes look bulletproof, but maybe they have a failure. Or maybe Antonelli or Russell make a mistake. Then you can bite your chance and go in for a victory. But the way they just were so adamant of their strategy, and Fred Vasseur comes out post-race and says, we have no regrets in what we did. Our pace was our pace. Our strategy was our strategy. I just thought that was naive. And it was once again Ferrari shooting themselves in the foot because they've made a car that's racy. It's got pace. It's a very good car. But it's very similar to the 2016, 2017s where Mercedes is so fast. Ferrari is also fast, but they're not incredibly fast like Mercedes are. So you're going to have to make the right decisions at the right time to benefit yourself in one, the constructors, and also two, in the drivers. Because Lewis Hamilton looked racy. This is his type of car. There's enough on it. It's a little bit more snappy. It's a little bit more aggressive. The ground effect cars obviously were not for him. That era for him sucked, and it looked like the life was sucked out of him last year. And it thought if it didn't go this way, if it didn't go his way this season, it could have been the end. But this Ferrari car was racy. This Ferrari car has race pace. It might not have one lap pace, but it can stay with the Merc over a race distance. And they had the opportunity there to split the strategy because they had track position to go and cause Mercedes some problems, to go and put them on the back foot. But they just didn't pull the trigger, and it really showed, because once they gave up that pit stop difference, when Charles Leclerc, he ended up pitting lap 25, because obviously the Bottas VSC, by the time they got around to the front of the pitch straight and the pit lane was closed. So it was a perfect time for them to pit lap 18 after Bottas had pulled over, but I really thought they should have pulled the trigger, at least with one car, like Hamilton said in the initial moments there. They end up running out, as I said, P3 and P4, which is probably where they are on raw pace. But with the race pace and strategy, you could have had a position where, yes, Russell probably wins it, but you get Charles Leclerc in P2, or you get Lewis Hamilton in P2, and you get a 2-4. And you know what? That's massive for the constructors, because you're not giving up a 1-2 to your rivals. Kimi Antonelli had a crazy weekend. I don't think it was that impressive. I think it was impressive that he got into P2 considering everything that went on. But the raw pace of Hamilton in the race, he was catching Leclerc. He only ends up a few tenths back of Charles Leclerc. He looked good. Leclerc was staying with George Russell. So I really think it was a massive opportunity missed for Ferrari. But I guess it's a weird catch-22 where they've made a good car. They've got race pace. They can stay with the Merc when they're within that 1 second, or they can overtake. They've got that incredible start sequence, which I guess in China is going to be massive again. Get off the line. That one of them can qualify and split the Mercedes. If they can get a 2-4 or a 1-3 in qualifying somehow and just cause some problems and then get that bolt off the line, they could get 2 to 3 seconds up the road before Mercedes get going. And that could be massive, because if they have that buffer, they can start using each other. I think that's what they need to do. Start using each other's cars with the overtake mode, with the energy restore, the electrical restore, recharge, and just sort of like springboard each other up the track. Work with each other, because you've got a young driver in Kimi Antonelli, you've got an inexperienced, title fighter in George Russell, where you've got Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton Lewis Hamilton's won drivers' championships, and Charles Leclerc has been fighting in 2 now. So they know what it's all about. They can use each other to get this side up there, because I'm very worried we're going to get 2014 again, not to the same extent in terms of pure just energy. It's not just the engine, it's just the overall car build is looking very, very top tier for Mercedes. They've nailed the change of regulation. Their engines are unreal. The aero package looks good as well. They seem to be better all over the track. Look, Ferrari are much better than I thought on the straights, but they've got some catching up, I think, to do in the corners as well. And I just think, look, different tracks will suit them a little bit more. I think Bahrain, with the practice, so the preseason testing was done, it'll be a little bit closer. I think this circuit really suited the Mercedes, but if you're Ferrari, you can't be making these strategic mistakes again, because we've seen this before. We don't want to see it again. But I guess positives, the start sequence, the race pace is there. The improvements can be made. But the negative, again, is just the strategy. They're shooting themselves in the foot, and you end up 13 seconds back of the second place Mercedes. So, look, good for Ferrari, but there's a lot of improvements to be made in that car and in that strategy box there as well. We might as well talk about Mercedes. Again, awful start from both of them. Anthony drops down to P7, I think. George Russell just can't get off the grid. I think it was Antonelli that came to the grid with 0 electrical charge. He was the only one. I think Hadjar, Verstappen, I think someone else down the grid also had the same problem. Liam Lawson couldn't go off the line because he had a 0 charge as well. So that's why they just stunk off the line. Russell then back and forth with Leclerc across the first sort of 10 to 12 laps. They made the call and went and jumped into the pits in lap 12. Good double stack. They got them in and out quite nicely. And then from there, look, the strategy favoured them. They were going to go for a two-stop. They just held on with the tyres for the one-stop. And that's also ominous for this Mercedes car. They were really, really good on their tyres. Look, Russell and Antonelli are two of the best in terms of on their tyres. Obviously, Checo can do a good job like that, but these two drivers are not aggressive on their tyres. They can make them run long, but I think also the build of the car and the lack of pressure which Ferrari applied on them allowed them to take the tyres super long. So from lap 12 all the way through, really, really impressive from both those two there. I think Russell was the more complete. Went back and forth with Leclerc in the early stages. I guess I said strategy works his way, but even then he kept that buffer. Anthony closed the gap late on, but I really thought Kimi's weekend was all over the place. Made the mistakes early on. Qualifying just dropped into P2 in the race. Just dropped into P2. He worked his way through the field initially after dropping to P7, but the race pace of that car there is still electric. It really is Ferrari and Mercedes at the top, and then there's a massive gap, and you've got sort of Red Bull, then you've got McLaren, then you've probably got the RBs. But it really is Formula 1 and then Formula 2 in terms of the gap between those top four cars and then the rest of the grid. But he got up there, he got the P2, and I guess if he is going to be competing for the Drivers' Championship, we always talk about worse weekends, still keeping in touching with your distance with your rivals, because I'm really worried this year George Russell runs away with it because Anthony is super inconsistent. He's super young. The consistency is not there. And we're going to have the title wrapped up before we leave Europe, or as we leave Europe. And that's just not what we want, because we're going to get the constructors wrapped up pretty soon, I think. I think they win it, in Europe. In terms of the last quarter of the season, there'll be nothing to compete for in terms of constructors. But if we at least have the drivers going on with Antonelli keeping in touching distance to George Russell, that would be nice. And I think races like these where Antonelli isn't performing well but can do enough to get into P2 and close enough to George Russell is what we sort of want. I'll try and get up the lap by laps, but I think a while I should load them up prior. But I think over the lap distances, he had moments where he was pulling back on obviously George right at the end, but the early moments George had him covered. So I think George is more comfortable in this car here. It's a very drivable car, so Antonelli was able to come through the field. But I want to see Antonelli next race, less mistakes, more consistency, and keeping pressure on George over race distances. I want to see what he does at the front. What do Mercedes and Toto Wolff do when you've got two cars? One wants to pass, one's a little bit slower over some parts of the track, one's quick over some parts of the track. I want to see what happens there. I want to see that, play out at Mercedes, because we know what happened 2016 with Nico Rosberg. Impressive for Mercedes, dominant once again. We've got to talk about Arvid Lindblad. What a race for the young man in his first debut race. Ends up in P8. Had a crazy battle with Oliver Behrman through the middle point of the race. Oliver Behrman eventually getting past Arvid Lindblad at lap 40. Great ding-dong battle down the main straight. Late moves, dodgy moves maybe even, as they went down to turn one. Lindblad, I thought, took it to him. He used all his battery in that lap 40 to try and get around the outside into 8. But it was forced wide by Ollie Behrman. But I was really, really happy to see that. They're the future. That could be your future Ferrari driver. That could be your future Red Bull driver. They're going back and forth. I think he had a fantastic start up to P4, P3, I thought, after the first two corners. Electric starting sequence, got the elbows out. I thought he deployed the energy quite well around the track, and I hate that we're talking about who deployed energy best around the track, but he did that really, really well. That RB's got some pace, or at least has some pace in Australia. Interesting to see what happens into the next race. But a really, really handy, P8 in this one here. His teammate Liam Lawson was obviously stagnant off the line. I think it was an energy. He had zero energy off the line. The car just couldn't get going. He nearly caused an almighty crash. But Lindblad showed there's pace in that RB, but also he has a lot of pace as well. He has a lot of race pace as well. He gets his elbows out. He's competitive. He wants to take it to the opposition. And that was one of the great battles of the race. Over 20 laps, Bam was saying he was stuck behind Liam Lawson. He complained about, the overtake or the boost mode not giving you enough to close the gap. And we didn't see much of the lead up, but obviously that was troubling him. And that's where we circle back once again to these, 50-50 electrical power units. DRS, I didn't mind, but it never really allowed you to get back at as once someone passes you, you can never really get back at them. And it was only really circuits like Saudi Arabia where you saw people jockeying for DRS. Who wants the DRS? Vegas, who wants the DRS? So it got a bit silly at times, and I think it could get even worse with the overtake, and the boost modes. But the fact that Behrman saying it was a 20-lap, consistent sort of push with the overtake mode and the boost mode to continue to try and close that gap and unable to overtake, we come back to the problem of, is this electrical boost mode and overtake mode really going to, allow for racing? I thought it was stupid at other parts where you're just seeing cars go back and forth because obviously one gets overtake, one doesn't, one goes past, the next overtake straight, you get overtake, and it just goes back and forth. But obviously it wasn't that aggressive. I guess maybe that's a positive there. They had 20 laps to fight. But if it's taking 20 laps to get past someone who you're faster than, that's also a problem as well. We're talking about Ollie Behrman. I thought he had a great race as well. P7, obviously a lap down, but big points for him and Haas. 6th place. I know Esteban Ocon came out post-race and mentioned once again how one car performed and one car didn't. He said that was a symbol of Haas's season last year, and that does ring a bell. There was always one Haas car performing really well, normally Ollie Behrman, and one didn't perform well, normally Esteban Ocon. So maybe that just Ocon not having the pace. He ended up in P11. He had a great battle with his countryman Pierre Gasly. Really, really close between those two throughout the race. But you look at the fastest laps of this one here, Ollie Behrman in a 124 flat, which was by far the best of the rest. Arvid Lindblad within a tenth of that. And then Gabriel Bortoletti put in a 123, which is really, really impressive for him in the Audi. He also had a great race as well. But I guess talking about the Gasly Ocon fight, Ocon once again unable to really get the best out of that Haas car. Gasly had a great start, got himself off the grid, kept that P10 despite Esteban Ocon going right at him. End plate damage in there as well. But I was really, really impressed the way that Pierre Gasly was able to hold on for points. The Alpine car looks really, really average and mediocre once again. Haven't obviously made the use of that Mercedes engine, same as McLaren, same as Williams. It seems to be all the cars that have got the Mercedes engine have just not worked out how to best use it. And that is a problem they're going to have to fix going into Suzuka, because I don't think they can fix it obviously in a couple of days. Team's already traveling over to China and getting set up for China, so there's not enough time to make enough adjustments to get the most out of that engine and that unit. But these teams obviously are not maximizing the engine in behind that car there. But considering Haas looked quicker and looked more consistent over the race distance, it was really, really good from Pierre Gasly to pick up that singular point and hold Esteban Ocon at bay. Great battling down the straight, back and forth for like 30 laps between those two there. But in the end, Esteban just not having enough on the race day once again to get past, this time Pierre Gasly. So he missed out on points. Gasly got important points. And Gabriel Bortoletti, bravo, my friend, bravo. And Audi, bravo to you as well. You obviously had the awful start with Nico Hülkenberg, the telemetry problem. He can't start the race. Gabby Bortoletti, not bad off the start. Got his elbows out, got amongst it. Really, in his own way, ran his own race. Was sort of, once he cleared Pierre Gasly, had a lot of clear track in front of him. Never really quite caught up to Arvid Lindblad until really late on. But just putting consistent laps, the Audi engine, it held on. It held on really, really nicely. No real problems there for him. It never really got into much of a battle. Ocon and Gasly came together lap 21. That was a big moment. Outside of that, obviously, we got the VSC in lap 18 and lap 12, but he sort of ran his own race here. Nothing I really noted over the race distance, but just did a good job. And Audi did a great job again. Good pit stop, nice strategy, quick enough car. I think that the Audi could cause some problems. It could be a team that could consistently get that 7th to 10th, maybe a double points finish, the odd points finish, the high points finish. It's got pace. And whilst the Cadillacs and the Williams and the Aston Martins are so far off it, and if the Red Bulls and the RBs have some sort of, in the Ford engine has some problems, you have a few dropping out, there's a real chance here for this side to pick up some great points early in the season, just down to pure consistency and the reliability. And I think it was a really, really solid outfit they looked like in that first race there. Fantastic from Gabby Bortoleto. Look, 7, 8, 9, Behrman, Lindblad and Bortoleto all did a fantastic job to get their respective sides in the points and some handy points to start the season off for their side. And then a final shout to, obviously, Lando Norris and Max Verstappen. Two interesting races on their own. As I said, Piastri spins it off the start, so McLaren only have one in the race. They've come off being the best team on the grid into race one, where they're really nowhere near it. The pace isn't there. They look slow in qualifying, okay in different practice sessions, but as I said, Sector 2 and Sector 3, then they weren't ever really that quick. And super impressive for Lando Norris to keep P5. Max Verstappen steaming in behind him on a fresh set of hards, but he held on in the end on those mediums. He showed, I guess, why he was a champion in this race here, because he got the maximum he could out of that tractor, that McLaren tractor. It really felt like a tractor this weekend. As I said, he's a long way off of 35 seconds back of Lewis Hamilton in P4, but in the end held about a 2.5 second gap over Max Verstappen. Good, solid, consistent drive for him. Didn't really put a foot wrong. When Max came charging on the fresh set of hards, he kept him at bay. Didn't read too much into the energy deployment. Both were sort of dumping battery to try and get ahead of each other and keep ahead of each other. But I just think really impressive drive for him to keep in P5, get some really handy points. Look, they're a project, McLaren. You're not going to see the best of them, I think, until we're well and truly into the European swing. This car looks a long way off. They need to understand how to get the best of the Mercedes engine. They need to understand how to look quicker in one lap pace. Their one lap pace isn't there. The race pace is just so. And as I said, it's Formula One with Ferrari and Mercedes. Then there's Red Bull, and then there's McLaren. They're nowhere really ready to compete in that sort of top 5, top 4. And the fact that he got into P5 just goes to show the quality of Lando Norris. And Max Verstappen started P20. Great start. Got to the midfield pack. He said he wasn't really impressed because he has the pace over the rest of the field, and that makes sense. I think he'd be disappointed he couldn't get the better of Lando Norris, but he kept complaining of the hard tyres graining and degrading really fast. So Ford and Red Bull have got some problems in terms of, obviously, for the engine being a little bit more consistent. Isaac Hadjar complaining of problems from the formation lap, and obviously then he told the team all these problems. They thought he could keep going. He ends up having to pull over and pull aside at lap 12, which ruined his race. So there's some problems there. Liam Lawson couldn't get off the line. Verstappen had multiple moments in the race where he just couldn't deploy any of the electrical energy. And then for the Red Bull car, Verstappen is in a very aggressive drive, and he said his hards were degrading super quickly. So they're going to have a review of how they can hopefully get the tyres lasting a little bit longer, how they can get this engine to be more consistent with less problems with the electrical, dumping of energy and with the error messages that Isaac Hadjar was having. So it's a lot of learning for McLaren and Red Bull. I think Red Bull ahead of McLaren, but both sides will be thinking we got a long way to go to catch Mercedes and catch Ferrari. Once again, Verstappen comes out and complains that this is not sort of, these regulations aren't for him. He wasn't a big fan of the racing. You can hear him over the radio to his team complaining about, unable to use energy or the inconsistencies with it. And that's sort of where I come from, with the fact that why are racers having to do some sort of strategy into the dumping energy when they just are there to race? Verstappen is there to race, be the latest, the late breakers, be aggressive into turn ones and get the elbows out on the main straight. That's what racing is all about. But in the end, we didn't get to see much of that. Lando Norris, I thought really good. 3.5 seconds was the gap to Max when he strapped on that new set of hard tyres, had the delta in terms of fresher tyres, the more bulletproof tyres in the hards, but he got within 9/10 of Norris after 4 laps into lap 46, but outside of that, the last 12 laps, Lando kept in around a second and a half distance and ran out quite comfortable then, P5. Haven't talked about the Williams. No pace, absolutely no pace at all. They came overweight. They couldn't make the shakedown. They looked slow in the preseason testing. Looked slow yet again. Carlos Sainz complained the car was undrivable. Albon saying this is the best he could have done in P12. They've got problems. Again, the Mercedes engine behind that car there, you'd think they'd be quicker than that. They similar to Aston Martin, were talking about how this was supposed to be their year. James Vowles made it pretty clear that you break everything so they learn coming into this season. And it's been probably the most underwhelming start, I think. When you think about, we had zero expectations for Cadillac, zero expectations for Aston Martin. Maybe Alpine alongside Williams, probably we have the least, the most underwhelming race one. People thought Alpine could be the 5th quickest car, the best of the rest. They were nowhere near it. Williams, this is supposed to be their year. This is supposed to be where they show what they're all about, potentially competing up there in the constructors, but so poor, so slow. And since practice, you could tell they're never really at it, never really at the races. And a really tough weekend for both Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon, 12th and 15th respectively. Carlos Sainz had some problems with his active area. The front wing, I think, stayed open. So he had to come in and pit for that, and that left him 2 laps behind. Fair play, Checo Perez. Quickly talk about Cadillac before I wrap this one up. He finished the race with Cadillac 3 laps down, but they got a race distance complete. Fantastic for him. Valtteri Bottas had some problems with his steering wheel and the connection there. He changed the steering wheel, came back out, and then had to retire lap 18. He was always a good sort of 4/10 back of Checo all weekend long, so he really struggled to get the grips with that for Cadillac. But look, they got the race distance done. They can look at some of the data. They can try and work on what worked, what doesn't work. I'd love to see this team at least be in the midst come later in the season for maybe nicking a point if strategy can go their way. If we get a crazy race, if we get changeable conditions, I'd love to see them at least able to potentially nick a P10. That's what I think I want them to get come season's end. It's going to be a long, hard scrap. It's going to be like Manor Racing from a few years ago in terms of they're going to have to work their socks off to close that gap. But good to see them finish the race in this one here. Stroll got not classified in the end, 15 laps down. Fernando had to retire. They've probably got even more of a mountain to climb. Aston Martin to work out what's going on there with the engine, with the setup, with the vibrations. That's a whole problem in itself. But I'll get into it more in depth, breakdown of each driver in my driver ratings coming out later in the week. But yeah, really, really solid race from Mercedes. We expected that from them. They did what they were supposed to do. I was very impressed with the race pace of Ferrari, disappointed in their strategy. Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, fair play, did their best job. And then Arvid Lindblad, Ollie Behrman, and Gabriel Bortoleto. Well, that's going to be exciting. I think it's exciting competition, that sort of midfield battle outside the big boys as they, I think, will go back and forth all season long with some competitive packages and some really competitive drivers as well. So that is that for the full race wrap up. I'll quickly review my predictions for race 1 at Melbourne. I made some mistakes here, but I think I made also some really good predictions as well. Starting with pole position, I said Max Verstappen. We obviously saw what happened there, send it into the wall. To be honest, I could have been boring and gone Russell because I went that way later on. But Max, I don't think, even if he was in Q3, I don't think he could have made pole position. Mercedes 1 lap pace, I think all year long will be much better than everyone else. It's about if anyone can close up in the race trim. So yeah, pole prediction there. Boring would have been the way to go there. But yeah, in the end, George Russell picking up pole by a country mile. So 0 points there. P1, George Russell, nailed that. That's a point for my predictions. Fantastic race. As I said, controlled it, did what he had to do. Always looked quicker than everyone else. And was sort of handed that win with Ferrari's strategy team once again, letting the drivers down. P2, Max Verstappen. Sort of felt like a P2 where he came through from P20 up into P6. But no good there. And Oscar Piastri, P3. I wish he could be P3. The Aussie curse lives on, unfortunately. Disappointing there for Oscar Piastri. My good was Arvid Lindblad. I'm taking that as a massive win. I think he was super impressive. One of the most racy drivers out there on race day. Showed the RB's pace. Got his elbows out. Fantastic start. Loved that battle with Ollie Behrman on lap 40. A really, really good race from him. He said it was nuts. It was pinching himself. What an experience for the 18-year-old. He looks the package. And I think Red Bull, once again, have got another superb driver in their ranks. And if things don't go right, if Max decides to leave come season's end, Well, an Isaac Hajar and Lindblad combination will be tasty. There's two really aggressive front-footed drivers, but love the work Arvid Lindblad did in this this race here. He definitely was the good from this weekend. And the ugly Carlos Sainz thing, I nailed that as well. It was ugly. Williams were poor. Their race pace wasn't there. Their qualifying pace wasn't there. Their car, no good. No good at all. And as I said there, one of the most underwhelming packages considering the expectation we have for them coming into the season. They have just criminally underperformed in this race. And so far in this season here, quickest lap in a 1:23.5 in the end. So as the race went on, able to get a little bit more pace there, but yeah, not quick enough for me. Franco Colapinto had a quicker time, his fast lap in the race, and yeah, nowhere near the top end pack. Verstappen in a 1:22. And the slowest, a 1:22.6, and George Russell, who was nursing some old tyres there. So they're still a long way back of that top end pack of pure speed. It's a long way to go for Williams, and that is a big disappointment. And Carlos Sainz, yeah, he said he was unrivalable, so that was a big tick for me there. So the good and the ugly I've nailed. I've nailed the race win. That's 3 points so far. Random prediction, Ollie Behrman in P11. Well, he absolutely overachieved in P7, so didn't pick up a point there. And my storyline of Ferrari looked the quickest over race pace, but no overtaking. I've got half a right. I wish I was a little bit more precise in my prediction, saying Ferrari the quickest over race pace, which I think I'd almost would have given myself if I just said that, but no overtaking. We got 124 overtakes. Were they legitimate overtakes? That's something for your own opinion to make up. As I said, I'm coming back to that, swings and roundabouts once again. We're coming back to that same discussion. I think the whole gimmick of this overtake mode and boost mode is going to make overtakes feel less special. And I think we're going to get some problems in China with that. It might suit Suzuka a little bit better, but I think we're going to get these really, really slingshot type overtakes, which is gimmicky and rubbish, I think, with this whole overtake mode and this electrical output. Not a big fan of it. The storyline never really then lands because there was a lot of overtaking. But I guess if you take what Ollie Behrman said, that he was stuck behind Arvid Lindblad for 20 laps because of this overtake mode and him using and Lindblad using the boost, well, maybe there won't be overtaking at some places. That's just, it's crazy because I'll finish, I guess, on this. I really think, as I said, the aero package and the new car designs makes it easier for cars to follow. You keep last season's hybrid engines and allow just a set amount of electrical energy to be exhausted over the race distance, then you could have some really, really interesting racing. You've got that overtake mode to use when you want to at any moment in time. And then so you can scrap DRS, you got the active aero, you got this new aerodynamic design cars, a little bit smaller, lighter, and encouraging following. You're going to get some good racing. I think the main catalyst to cars staying close and being competitive was the new aero package which they introduced. It wasn't this new electrical engine 50-50 split which they introduced, because it's not Formula One. That's it for me. The lifting off or losing speed and braking half down a straight is not F1. Back and forth yo-yo overtaking in a race is not F1. It takes away the meaning of an overtake. It takes away what qualifying is all about. And we've gone from qualifying Grand Prix, which everyone called last season, to potentially this season, that mean nothing. It's about the starting sequence Grand Prix or the recharge Grand Prix. Because whoever recharges the best or whoever has the best energy output on this straight is going to win the race because they're smarter with their energy output and they're not. That's how you win. We don't want that. We want wheel-to-wheel racing. We want mistakes that come from drivers pushing, not from these electrical engines giving way and causing drives to spin or being the reason why teams can't get off the line. And look, I like it because it means Ferrari's going to be up there and competitive. But what we saw with Bortoleto having to show the most incredible reflexes to get past Liam Lawson, he just got stuck on the line. That's not F1 for me. So there's a long way to go. I might come around to it, but I just think this whole electrical new 50-50 split is not for me. I love the aero package. I love the active aero. I don't mind that we've gotten rid of DRS, But this whole recharge, output, boost mode, overtake mode is just not for me. It just isn't. It's not racing. It's not F1 racing. If you want electrical racing, go to Formula E. This is Formula One. This is a pinnacle of racing. And I think what we saw here at Albert Park is Formula One. But that's just my thoughts on the weekend. Love to hear your thoughts. This week, the outlook, we've got driver ratings coming out. We've got the prediction video, and then I'm going to live stream the qualifying for China as well. Again, with conflicts, I won't be able to stream the race at this current point in time. But as I said, as the European swing comes around, it's the late nights here. I'll be streaming races, qualifying a lot. A lot to look forward to. Thank you guys for joining me in this one here. Let me know your thoughts on the weekend, on these new regulations in the comment section. Check out some of the clips going out during the week. Join me for qualifying, watch along on Saturday. And that being said, guys, have a great rest of your day. And I'll see you guys the video or live stream very, very soon. Until next time, I'll see you very, very soon.